So I was really called to bring up combustion. And if you look up combustion in the human body, because there is such a thing, cellular respiration, right? So our breath, cellular respiration, right? We'll get into that maybe at a different time. But respiration is indeed a combustion reaction where energy is released through the chemical reaction between glucose and oxygen. Okay, well, this makes sense to me because I also recorded yesterday about ketonics. Let's keep going. Producing carbon dioxide and water as byproducts. Essentially, the body burns, and I know if you're a nutritionist or, a doctor, this or a nurse, this makes sense to you. I am not. It's fun to remind myself about these things I learned in college and then forget. Essentially, the body burns glucose to generate energy in the form of ATP within the cells, right? But that is also what the guides are referring to as combustion. So that's what's happening in our cells right now. And what the guides are telling me is we're burning more. So being aware of that. I'm not saying to eat more sugar or glucose forms of sugar in order to, but I'm being shown right now as I say that, a hummingbird. So if you think about a hummingbird, they have to eat a lot because they're burning so much fuel. So and high amounts of sugar, like the sugar water or whatever they put in the honey, for the nectar. Oh, I think that's going to be relevant. Okay. And when I had been talking about this tube or flute, I'd also been hearing mitochondria. So this is just a reference for me to kind of put this all together, because this has been like a series for me of 20 recordings. So I feel called, and I'm just on that AI overview when you Google something, but I feel like this is important. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to come back to fluid thermodynamics and maybe tie this all together. So key points about respiration: reactants, glucose, and oxygen. Produces, or the products are carbon dioxide and water. Energy produced is ATP. Process description, mitochondria. Okay, there it is. It does occur within the mitochondria, the tubes of the cells, breaking down glucose molecules to extract energy. So this is just validation for me and how the guides share the energy with me. So this is a double meaning. Like, this is happening at a cellular level, and this is being enhanced right now. So this is another reason the guides are like, this is why you feel so weird. You're burning a lot of energy. So some of us are being really required to change our diets. We're craving different things. And this is why I've always spoken before about the importance of doing a cleanse, some type of parasite cleanse would be good. You could talk to your doctor about it, especially if you have a naturopath. You could find out. I say talk to your doctor because it's good to have a relationship with your doctor if you can. I can't say that I do, but I'm working on finding one that you can have these conversations with. Get together with a nutritionist and figure out what might be good for you, because the parasites and heavy metals can cause, and they're showing me as I say this is part of what they're referring to as rocks in our shoe. So parasites are rocks in our shoe. We're changing how it changes our interaction with our environment because it's in our body, and we're not able to break certain things down that are needed for this process of combustion. So the fuel, it's blocking the fuel. So what I'm being shown is that we're doing this naturally, but we could help it out a little bit, help it out along the way. This is a reference on a physical level as to why some people, they're telling me that the layovers in the airport might take longer before those chemical reactions can really occur to the greatest extent, is what they're saying. And they're playing with that as words, like I'm hearing to the greatest extent. So how long do we want it to take so that we can have more fuel for the long run, right? To change how far it's going to take us into the next dimension level layer of existence. Okay. Okay, so I was called to look this up on Wikipedia again, but I use other websites too. It just so happens that it's the easiest one for me to kind of share screen if I want to share screen. But, you know, as I always say, this is happening inside of the body, but it's also happening on the earth. So ascension. We're not the only ones going through this. So let's play with this. So essentially what I was called to look up was mass balance of the global reaction. I thought, wait a minute, global reaction. I was just talking about the body. My eyes were drawn to that. And so if I look this up and I click on, so it talks about exothermic and okay, I'm gonna bear with me. Exothermic, the negative triangle in G, not sure what that is, indicates that the reaction is exothermic. So they're giving us, talking about potential of this mathematical equation, which is hilarious because my guys are like, it's math. All right, are you ready? Here we go. We're talking about new organisms. We're talking about new elements. I think I said that in the beginning of the video, talking about being in a different dimension, new elements on the periodic table. So they're trying to show this chain. My guides have used the word triglyceride before, so we'll come back to that. So I'm going to read this out loud. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen in order to create ATP, which we know this, right? We're going to skip the products of this process. So it requires pyruvate to the mitochondria in order to fully be oxidized. My previous video, I was talking about oxidation being a key element to this element. Oxidized by the citric acid cycle. Ooh, the Krebs cycle is a series of biochemical reactions to release the energy stored in nutrients through the oxidization derived from carbohydrates. Okay. The products of this process are carbon dioxide and water, and the energy transferred is, this is the key here, is used to make bonds between ADP and a third phosphate group to form ATP, adenosine triphosphate. By substrate levels, phosphorylation NADH and FADH2. Now, I'm not going to go into all of that. But what I found interesting is it is the first large protein, NADH, complex of the respiratory chains of many organisms, from bacteria to humans. It catalyzes the transfer of electrons. Okay, there's a whole other rabbit hole here. In addition to that, we'll come back to that. So I wanted to get into the mass balance of the global reaction. So exothermic and exergonic, so sorry that I'm butchering this. So these are chemical reactions, can occur spontaneously. This is relevant. I'm not sure why yet. And I think this is going to then launch us into thermodynamics. So exothermic, for those of you probably already know what this is, but oh, it is in thermodynamics. Oh, so funny. You guys, I write down thermodynamics all the time. They're like, oh, just look up thermodynamics, my guides. I'm like, okay. Yeah, because that makes a lot of sense. Thermodynamics is an exothermic process. Oh, wait, in thermodynamics, an exothermic process is a thermodynamic process or reaction that releases energy from the system to its surroundings, usually in the form of heat, but also in a form of light, electricity, or sound. Now, what's interesting about this is I see this all as relevant because my guides keep saying there's more light. It's a different sound. We're on a different bandwidth. There's a different wavelength, aka light, energy, and sound. And so we're operating in a different dimensional shield is what they're calling it. Let me play with that briefly. And as I was writing that, I was hearing fluid thermodynamics as a reminder and split. So I'm going to come back to this. So if you're looking at, oh boy, okay, this is all relevant. So I'm just going to read it. So let me come back to that and I'll share screen. So let me just ask if I should focus on, okay, I'm going to finish. So essentially, either of these chemical reactions can occur spontaneously. It doesn't mean that they will. And the irony is, a minute ago, I was looking up combustion and what combusts in the human. And of course, spontaneous combustion came up. And so it says this can occur spontaneous. And I was hearing in my mind spontaneous combustion, but not necessarily in the human. It's all happening at once. It's happening in the human. Simultaneously, it's happening on the earth. Also, these are spontaneously happening within us and around us. So it's a double, triple meaning. The potential of these reactions is converted to more ATP through an electron transport. And remember, this ATP is the nucleoside triphosphate that provides energy to drive and support many processes in living cells, such as muscle contraction, nerve impulse propagation, chemical synthesis. All forms of life have this, right? I think this is really important. Whew, so much fun. Okay, so the potential is converted to more ATP, or so more of this energy is converted through an electron transport chain. I'll come back to that, maybe. With oxygen and protons, hydrogen ions, but there's more, that doesn't just come from the sun, as the terminal electron acceptors. I'm laughing because I've had so many of these meditations where they talk about acceptance. It's a double meaning. We're going to accept these electrons, and this has to do with the transport chain. Whoop, whoop. Most of the ATP produced by aerobic cellular respiration is made earlier. My previous video, they wanted me to look up oxidation. Most of this ATP produced by aerobic cellular respiration is made by oxidative phosphorylation. Pretty sure I wrote that word down and thought I made it up. And that is the metabolic pathway in which cells use enzymes to oxidize nutrients, therefore releasing chemical energy in order to produce ATP. So the energy released is used to create a chemiosmotic potential by pumping protons across a membrane. Now, in previous videos, before a long time ago, when I was starting to look at these beginning processes, basically what the guides were showing me is this oxygen. Okay, I'm hearing portmanteau of words. The oxidization and eradication of free radicals radiates and allows the membrane to open up more fluidly, so more energy can pass through and get in and out of the membrane. And they're showing me the gate. So in my previous video, I talked about the gate. It was like we had a gate. They showed me a pinball machine that was broken. If you've ever seen a pinball machine, like one of the hinges was broken. So the gate was only halfway working, we could say. Or we were only getting so much to parts of the body because we had all these rocks blocking certain gates. And what I'm hearing is unusable energy. Maybe it's stored in the body, we could say. So I got a little lost there, squirrel. So this potential is then used to drive ATP synthase and produce it from another group. Okay. It says it can be made per oxidized glucose. The maximum yield is never quite reached because of losses due to leaky membranes, as well as the cost of moving it. This has to do with the earth, or I don't know. We'll come back to that. This is not where I'm being called to go. But oh my goodness, I could really go down the rabbit hole on this one. All right, I'm not going to quite go down this next rabbit hole, but I also think this has to do with water. This has to do with the water in our bodies. It has to do with the the electrons. Electrolytes is what I'm hearing, salt, in the body. I'm hearing corrosion, corrosive. So, if your body is not able to balance, you might have to add more. I'm seeing electrodes, electrons, but essentially something about our body of water is also going through, I'm hearing transducing. So if that's happening, that's also happening in the ocean and I'm hearing within plant life. Well, I'm sure animals too, but all right. I'm hearing versus corrosion. So I'm being called to talk about that briefly. So I said earlier, and a lot of us have heard that we're going from one version of the human into an upgraded version of the human. A lot of people have been talking about carbon to crystalline, and I'm sure there's some, scientists that can explain that, or teachers that are explaining it. Maybe the two teachers I mentioned at the beginning of this video are already talking about it. But essentially, I keep writing down transduction. So transduction, according to what I'm reading just by Googling it, is a process that can refer to the transfer of genetic material or the conversion of a message or energy into another form. Oh, I could totally go down the rabbit hole on that one. Isn't that fun? Also, the process by which a virus transfers genetic material from one bacterium to another. That's not where we're going with this. But I do want to talk about is in genetics also, but I have a feeling it has more to do with electricity. So we're going to talk about that. Oh no, it's also genetics as well. So where do we want to go with this, right? This is kind of why it can just be really overwhelming for me, but also fun, because it's like the guides are like everything here now all at once, all of the above. So we're going to see changes happening in the human body, on the earth body, in physics, in I'm hearing microscopic science, like something about what we're studying under the microscope is going to be like, whoa, where did that come from? I've been studying this forever and I've never seen that, because it's the Mandela effect. So I encourage you to look that up, because the reality in which we're exploring this information now holds new information, because we've actually transformed it through our perception, through the mutation that's happening within, or ascension, we could call it a mutation. We're all mutants. So let's talk about that just briefly. So again, there's a lot of things you can look up on transduction. I'm called to look up signal transduction. So briefly, transduction, they're talking about leading through or across. Now, I know I've done other videos where I've talked about transduction before, but most likely, but just sharing, so I was called to go into a little bit more detail on what that means on a down the rabbit hole kind of, this is the process of what's happening in the body, on the earth. And I want to go back to some of the earth changes that are going on as well. But a signal transduction is any process by which a biological cell converts one kind of signal or stimulus into another, And I could go down so many different portals about that. There's also something called olfactory system where, oh, I love this. Okay. It talks about, there's something about this. Oh, okay. I'll have to go back to this because there's something called olfactory transduction, sugar signal transduction, transduction in biophysics, the conveyance of energy from one electron to another at the same time that the class of energy changes. So the beginning of my video, the guide said the energy has changed, which is very vague, right? But basically what they're showing is because of transduction, the energy has changed. We've gone from one energy to something else. And then also what's interesting is transduction is the process by which foreign DNA is introduced into a cell. So it's gene transfer. It does not require physical contact. Whoo, how deep do we go here? So also in physiology, transduction is the translation of arriving stimulus into an action potential by a sensory receptor. It begins when stimulus changes the membrane potential of a sensory receptor, or a process by which a transducer converts one type of energy to another. Wow. This is, can you guys see, like, I mean, I'm looking at this and it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Everything is changing. Like there is nothing is what it once was, because everything is operating at a higher pitch, a higher level. So a higher range, a higher frequency. So I'm being called to talk about that a little bit. All right, I'm gonna see if I can finish this up the best I can. So I was also shown, one of the things I was shown is this baseball diamond, which I drew on here in so many different drawings, and I never quite understood it. But essentially I have this, I've drawn it as a bow before, right? If you ever look at a baseball field, here's the field, right? And then here's a cross through the middle, which I drew, and then this is the diamond. So if we get rid of the cross, which last time it was a bow, I was kind of shown this as the energy. And this has to do with arcing, self-conductivity. Once the, I'll get to that maybe later. And I'm fairly sure that what I drew in my previous drawing, which I haven't posted because it was so all over the place, I drew this about a week ago, has something to do with gates. Maybe an electrical gates, electricity, and thermodynamics. So transduction we kind of covered. The baseball, the shape of the baseball was relevant for me. And essentially what they've said, what the guides are saying is this combustion is giving us an opportunity to play the game different. It changes the format of the game. It changes the rules of the game. It changes the tempo, right? The rhythm of the game. And I keep getting this reference to come back to layovers, the catcher's mitt, and let's just stick with pitcher, baseball, diamond, and higher range for now. And then I might do a to be continued to talk more about the Russell Walter now that I've seen that. That might help me understand the cube. We'll talk about the hypercube in a different video. And then maybe I'll get to dimensional shield and thermodynamics split and fluted through a tube. Okay. So higher range. Now, if you look at a pitch, I looked up baseball because I thought, well, they're using a lot of baseball references. So it turns out that there is something having to do with physics and baseball. Well, obviously physics and everything, but okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about pitch first. And again, this is meant to be multi-dimensional here. So when I look up I'm just going to play with this briefly. Pitch can refer to the pitch of a helical tube. In a heat transfer, I drew this person in a tube, not knowing that might be what I'm referring to. And ironically, I drew this tube on a musical line and did not think that that was relevant either. But now I'm going back and looking at this going, okay, this is all relevant. So a pitch can refer to the pitch of a helical tube in a heat transfer appliance. Back to transduction, back to what we were talking about earlier, or to the pitch of a baseball. Hence why my guides were showing me baseball. But there is something having to do with the shape of the diamond, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. The pitch of a helical tube can be varied to improve the overall performance of a heat transfer appliance. A variable radial pitch can improve, okay, we'll come back to that. Fluid thermodynamics, this is where we're going with this. Properties of fluids include temperature, pressure, density, internal energy, specific volume, and specific weight. Fluid thermodynamics can be used to analyze the flow patterns, pressure drop, and heat transfer in a system. For example, a curveball pitch in baseball uses Bernoulli's principle, which is based on fluid dynamics. So the guys are like, yeah, put these together. So let's play with that a little bit. Let me just, it's too bright. All right, so if we look at the Bernoulli's, apologies if I'm mispronouncing this, but it just talks about how the speed of a fluid relates to the pressure of a fluid. They also use it as as the speed of a fluid increases, its pressure decreases. I can see that having double meanings also, because how many of us have heard time is speeding up, things are getting hotter, things are moving faster, but the pressure actually decreases. So in some ways, if we're just going to play with that as a metaphor or analogy to these different topics, it's a good thing, right? The pressure will decrease as things heat up, but that's not the way it seems at first. That's obviously not the definition, but I'm playing with all of this as multidimensional. And so if I go into, which this could, I'm just laughing because if I turn this on its side and I look up Bernoulli's principle, that's kind of what I drew. Oh my goodness. A Venturi meter, the kinetic energy increases at the expense of the fluid pressure. All right, maybe we'll play with that as one meaning and we'll come back to that. I'm going to end on this note. I'll finish this out and then I'll start another video. So Bernoulli's principle is a key concept in fluid dynamics that relates pressure, speed, and height. It states that an increase in the speed of a parcel of fluid occurs simultaneously with the decrease in either the pressure or the height above a datum. So it's the principle of conservation of energy. This states that in a steady flow, the sum of all forms of energy in a fluid is the same at all points that are free of viscous forces. Oh boy. Let's play with this just for a moment. So over my head. You guys, I'm just laughing because this takes me into a pilot tube. If you watched my last video, I was talking all about planes and airports, and it was a double, triple meaning here. But when I'm using a word that shows up in 3 different places, it's on purpose. So this has to do with a cross section. It has to do with a pilot tube, which has to do with, oh no, it's a pitot tube. I was way off, but it actually was introduced to determine the airspeed of aircraft and water boats and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I'm going to kind of stop there because I'm not sure how deep into this rabbit hole I should go, because there's so much to be pulled from this. And I have a feeling this has to do with not only electricity, but potentially the fluid dynamics. They keep saying that we're sending out a charge, it ignites a fusion. This has to do with our brain. It has to do with the ATP in the body. It has to do with the sound that is created and the signal that is sent out. There is a flow that it creates, and it's kinetic energy. And there's more to it. So, okay, I'm being guided to just play with that. Okay. So in my previous video, I had drawn this as a bow and arrow. And one of the things they talk about with a bow and arrow is a really good example of potential energy. So if you look at this picture, it's got a picture of a person shooting a bow and arrow. In physics, potential energy is the energy held by an object because of its position relative to other objects. And what I was talking about in my previous video is we are all shifting how we interact in this fluid because of our sound, our frequency, how many rocks we're carrying in our shoes. So essentially, what the potential we have shifts. It changes because of the position relative to other objects or interference. Something is happening, so we have less drag. We have less interference. And this is in part because of how our body is processing, regulating itself, and how we're exchanging with the template that is our body, that is the medium, with the template that is also part of the earth. And in this, it says any gain in kinetic energy a fluid may attain by its increased velocity through a constriction is balanced by a drop in pressure because of its loss in potential energy. What's ironic, I'm just seeing this as so many different meanings. Like, I could go all over the place with this because I was seeing this picture of us sitting in the airport and essentially helping carry people onto their next flight. I'd seen that in my vision. And there's something about this of us, the more of us that are able to carry this energy and this frequency at this charge, it's literally allowing the potential energy to shift as well because there's not as much drag. The kinetic energy is actually, everything is going up. And I'm sure there's more here that I definitely don't understand. But I will come back to this because this has a lot to do with, again, I kept saying tubes, 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 tubes. So there's all these tubes when I look up fluid dynamics and the Venturi effect that will take me into, boy, all kinds of fun stuff. All right, last but not least, this all came from me looking up Bernoulli's principle, which based on fluid dynamics is coming from baseball, and that principle. All right, last but not least, I was called to end on this pitch, and my guides are talking about the actual ball, right? They used this picture of all these baseballs stuck in this web. Like they were pitched and somebody caught them and they were all in this web. So I'll end on that, maybe start on that in the next. And if I look on baseball, there's actually something called a seam shifted wake. And I think what I'm going to do is share screen here, if I can. Here it is. You guys can see the spin on the baseball. Is an aerodynamic phenomenon involving baseballs. And it's talking about the seam. So when in specific locations relative to the direction of the ball, force the boundary layer to separate earlier or closer to the front of the ball than it normally would. Now I wrote down here fluid thermodynamics, dimensional shield, and split. So I'm sure there's more that I'll go into on this. But it says, if this occurs on one side of the ball and not the opposite side, a net force is produced. This force can be similar in magnitude to that caused by spin. And they're using the Magnus effect, which I'm not sure what that is. is a phenomenon occurs when a spinning object is moving through a fluid. A lift force acts on the spinning object, and its path may be deflected in a manner not present when it is not spinning. Okay. This shows in the particle image velocimetry image shown, the seam on the top of the ball right here is causing separation, wake formation on the top closer to the front of the ball than normal. The separation on the bottom of the ball is at the normal location. The resultant movement from its effect has been noted and named the laminar effect. Based on a mistaken notion that smooth portions of the ball cause a laminar boundary layer more prone to separation. Okay, so let me pause. Also, it's talking about it's an aerodynamic phenomenon that occurs when a baseball is thrown in a way that creates a smooth patch on one side, stitching on the other. This causes the air to move differently on each side of the ball, which can lead to the ball rotating on its axis that's perpendicular to the seams. I have a feeling this has to do with Earth. It can create turbulence and force that causes the ball to move in an unusual way. It can be similar in magnitude to the Magnus effect, which is the force caused by spin. So there we go. I think this is funny. So I'm going to end on that note because I am, yeah, that's where I'm at. So I wanted to just share, I'll go into this in a little bit more depth. But what's fascinating to me about all of this, I'm hearing it was a real fastball. This presentation wasn't exactly a fastball, but we've got thermodynamic, the law of thermodynamics is having this massive kind of impact. It's not even the law of thermodynamics, it's just thermodynamics, fluid thermodynamics. What my guides are showing me is there's all these baseballs, let's call it in space, in the energy webs, and maybe those are planets and they have a spin. And there's something that all of this is shifting. So I'm just hearing wobble wobble, and it causes this gate shift as well, because I keep hearing we're removing the heat. Oh my gosh. You guys ever seen that movie with Kevin Costner from like the 80s? It's so old. It's like, anyways, I'm just seeing this reference to called like, it's got Susan Sarandon. It's a pretty naughty movie for the 80s, but anyways, but it's about a baseball player and he's like, I don't know, I'm just seeing this reference. So essentially we've got this, it has to do with the path that we're taking in this planetary space, planetary alignment, and I'm just hearing there's more to come. So I'm going to end on that note. Keep playing ball, and thanks for playing. I'm sure some of you guys will have some ahas from this, and for those of you who made it this far to the end of the video, wow, thank you for playing, and congratulations to you, Gold Star. And thank you for everyone for just, I don't get a chance to read all the comments. This takes a lot of time. And a lot of, I am very, very wrapped up in all of this and also have regular things going on. So I'm always appreciative of you guys sharing these videos and sharing in these videos. And just thank you for your support. I know that this is a very, very strange presentation, but I feel like it's relevant to share how this information comes through because, again, all of us are pieces to the puzzle. And there might be one thing in here that I share that someone out there watches and goes, wait a minute, that answers my question about this. And who knows, we're all bridges. So in love and light, namaste.